accident that I began as an earth scientist. Earth science is about huge cycles of time. It's not about right now, it's about huge natural cycles that tell us where we fit right now into those big cycles. It's no accident, I think, that I ended up working in the corporations, because it taught me how people think when they are in fear, how they think in terms of, and in times of war. It taught me about how to train. Part of my job was training Air Force cadets on software, and some of them didn't want to learn the software. And so I learned about interfacing with people, and all of those principles I use in the work that I'm doing right now.
Steve Jobs says connect the dots in reverse, right?
Yeah, I believe that. So when I began looking in 1970s, I was looking at geologically at the cycles of the Earth, and at that time there was a concerted effort to keep the scientific boundaries in place. So if you study chemistry, it's in a box. You study archaeology, it's in a box. Geology, anthropology, it's in a box. And I said, nature doesn't work that way. We've got to cross those traditional boundaries, because there's a story, and the story is what we're living. So as a geologist, what I could see is that we are living this rare convergence of three massive cycles of change that very few people are talking about in the mainstream media. Bruce Lipton and I shared it at the United Nations. You mentioned that in the intro. Any one of these three cycles would be enough to turn the world upside down on end. And the fact that all three are converging right now tells us why the change is happening, why there's an openness for new ideas. The three cycles, one we are very aware of is climate. And if only climate were happening, climate change, that'd be enough to change the way we think, the way we grow our food, the way we share resources, the way we interact with one another. There's an economic cycle, 67-year economic cycle that is completing, and by definition, a new one is beginning. And if we don't know that, if we're still thinking about economies, and this isn't only about money, it's about people, and the way people work together, share information, and share resources. That's part of the economy. If we are still thinking the way we're thinking 10 or 15 years ago, that's where the struggle and the suffering comes from. The third cycle is fascinating to me, and the United Nations had never heard of this cycle, and I was amazed, because I would think that they would. It is a cycle of human conflict. And they said, what do you mean? Doesn't it just happen when it happens? And I said, well, actually, what the science shows is that human conflict ebbs and flows following the rhythms of magnetic fields between the sun and the earth and the human heart. Now, this is where it gets into what's called forbidden territory for science. The human heart is the strongest magnetic field in the human body. It's about 5,000 times stronger than the brain. And what we know, the science is showing us very clearly, peer-reviewed science, is that when the magnetic fields of the earth are strong, we are more cooperative and much less aggressive. And the reverse is true when the magnetic fields are weak. And we are now in a weakening cycle. So it doesn't mean that we must have conflict. It means that we are vulnerable and susceptible. And if you look at the charts, the ebbs and the flows of the great wars in the past, when they begin and when they end, they also end when these cycles, at the peaks and the valleys of these cycles. It means we are now living the greatest opportunity for peace because of our vulnerability, if we have the wisdom to recognize that and not succumb to the forces and the impetus